Our last presenter, Anastasia, is the resident architect and designer and artist exploring notions of identity, race, gender, politics through training sets and AI within technology. And I think, well, she'll talk about it, but it's really interesting stuff, and also kind of an interesting divergence from what she's done before. So I know she's still doing that the other stuff, the art, but it's a cool mix. So get ready.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I know it's been a while. My name is Anastasia Victor. I'm a resident here at Grey Area, as Nikki mentioned, and I'd like to talk to you about a bunch of random things, but mainly about what I've been working on at Grey Area. So, as Nikki mentioned, I have a pretty divergent background. I studied architecture and worked as an architect for a while, and I sort of split my time these days between working on really large-scale installation art, like I was a design lead for the temple at Burning Man last year, and also other things that are related to sort of immersive and spatial computing, like virtual and augmented reality. And so, for instance, over the last few months, I've been primarily working on a concept for the anchor artwork for Google's new campus called Magic Carpet, sort of like figuring out how to translate this very fluid, three-dimensional sign surface in Unity into like a buildable, tangible form, which has been very fun. This is the model that we developed for it, which unfortunately was vandalized at an exhibition at Mozilla on Friday night. Lasai. If you hear anything about it, please let the police know. No, seriously. But the other sort of side of things that I do really relates to augmented and virtual reality. I've been interested in AR and VR for many years now, and really interested in sort of this idea of spatial computing and interfaces, and this has sort of manifested itself into UI concepts like the one in the middle, which is a virtual operating system, which kind of has the whole Minority Report feel, but sort of alternatively has also emerged in things like the image on the far left, which is from my thesis 8 years ago. And it was an idea for how environmental indicators could show emotional state through brain-computer interfacing as an input. So I've really been thinking a lot about sort of biometrics and sort of biometric indicators and how we can observe this through the interfaces that we have. And at Grey Area, when I started here about like 6 months ago, I started looking into a bunch of different things like hand tracking and face tracking, and I was exploring ARKit and a bunch of other sort of like commercially available AR tech. And ARKit's facial tracking it's amazing. It's really nuanced. It is really great. I mean, it comes out of a company that has a lot of R&D budget, and they're able to sort of negotiate sort of variation in skin tone, for instance. Unlike other companies that perhaps don't have that budget. And so I was running into issues with like hand tracking frameworks, for instance, that would recognize the light side of my hand, but not the dark side. And that was a realization for me, especially given my background, because I didn't realize that this was a problem. And so I started looking into this, and it's a problem. It's a problem that many people have been researching and thinking about and trying to find solutions for. And it's really a problem with the way that we sort of interpret images and the training sets and the data that we use to do so. And so I decided to start working on a series of works called training sets that started to explore some of the issues around the way that we sort of create these systems, machine learning, facial tracking, analysis. So training sets is a series of works that uses facial tracking and analysis and machine learning to expose the ethical and social issues present in the creation and implementation of these technologies, such as implicit bias. And I am implementing these works through a series of interfaces because I have done a fair amount of interface design, and I think it's a really interesting and very like achievable and sort of maybe like interactive way that people can sort of come face to face with these things. And I've looked at a bunch of different precedents, and so the first, I guess one of the primary areas of research that I've been looking at has been in academia, and so people like Joy Buolamwini and Meredith Whittaker. So Joy is really amazing. She founded the Algorithmic Justice League, and she's been looking at doing sort of really quantitative analysis on commercially available facial recognition systems like Amazon Recognition, Microsoft Face, and has disturbingly found something like a rate of error or sort of miscategorization, like misrecognition, of up to about 30 to 35% with some of these systems, which means that like as a woman of color, there's a margin of error for that is up to 35%. And that is like, it's something that cannot be understated, like especially if you look at how these technologies are being applied. You know, Amazon, for instance, has partnered with a lot of police departments across the US, and they are using this technology. There's talk of incorporating them into their body cam systems, and that is really terrifying when there is the potential for a 35% chance of error that you might be misidentified. Meredith Whittaker is with the AI Now Institute, and she has been doing a lot of research they're based at NYU, Joy is based at MIT, and so Meredith has been doing research into just sort of the broader social implications of machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies. I've also been looking at a lot of very interesting research. So this is this is a study from South China University, and it's the facial beauty predictor, and they developed like a CNN to predict to give people an attractiveness score from 1 to 5, and I mean I think we can all see how, like, you know, the Black Mirror speculative future, how terrible this might be. The other is a little closer to home, and it is from Stanford, and it's like the machine learning equivalent of the gaydar, which I also think is extremely messed up. I mean, like, look at the features. I don't know if you are familiar with sort of feature detection, but like, it's really, this is a very controversial study. Understandably, it came out last year. This exists, and it's interesting that these studies are coming out and people are like, you know, up in arms about them, but at the same time, like, this is a model that someone can replicate, and they can take it and do what they want with it. And so, for instance, there are like many countries in the world where it's illegal to be homosexual. And this is a predictive model that could provide some, like, in some deterministic way, say like this person is or isn't, right? And so thinking about the applications of these technologies became like a very, very, I think is a really important thing to do right now. So the other things that I've been looking at is sort of like the art precedents for this, and this is Keiichi Matsuda, who is I think the head of design at Leap Motion now, but he, prior to doing that, did a lot of work with sort of speculative design and film, and like was just kind of like laying out these like very interesting augmented reality futures, and looking at this speculative future where we do have this sort of ubiquitous spatial computing. And artists like Adam Harvey, who Adam is one of the most prolific artists dealing with facial recognition and analysis technologies. And this is a project that was exhibited last year and funded by Mozilla called Megapixels, where he uses, it's the largest publicly available database of faces. It's called Megaface. And all of the images, I think it's something like, there's like probably around like 6 million images, a little over that, but it's sort of like somewhere around 600 to 700,000 unique individuals. And they're all scraped from Flickr. And so these are all images available in the public domain. And what Adam did is sort of collate these and then build out an interface for people to come by and see whether their face was included in it. And you know, it wasn't a huge number of people that were, but there were definitely, I think it was something like 5% of the people, about 15,000 people interacted with this, and 5% of their faces were in this database. And to me, this is really interesting because it's sort of like this indication of like how we really have no idea of how our data is being used. Like I have photos of myself on Flickr that are in the public domain. Did they make it into this database? I don't know. And so I've been working on a series of pieces, and so the first one I built out was called Face to Face, and it is an interface that analyzes faces in real time. It's using ARKit and Amazon recognition. I stream up a stream in real time to add recognition and print out the results. And it was exhibited for the first time at Grey Area in the installation, the exhibition they had a couple of months back, and then I've exhibited it sort of subsequently, like at XOXO and Mozilla and a few other places. And it's been like a really interesting thing to have people interact with, because automatically everyone seems to go into selfie mode, and that's cool. But then they're also like, wait, why is it saying these things about me? And so the moment like people start to dig below the surface, it becomes very apparent that they are like, that they're horrified that it's this thing, that this technology exists, that it can be put onto an iPhone 10, and that like, that's, you know, it's like very, very seemingly low tech, but sort of, you know, a low tech solution that has such far-reaching consequences. And so I'm just about to embark on building version 2.0 of this. And so the preliminary version was, I think, very interesting in that it allowed the individual to really engage with, you know, in real time with what a service like this might be doing. And mind you, there are a lot of issues, like network lag, for instance. But what it didn't allow was for this, for what it might feel like to have that information be overlaid onto another person. And so version 2.0 is going to be a multiplayer experience where users can sort of, I'm thinking with iPad, I was hoping to do it with a HMD, but that's probably not feasible. So iPad it is. So I think that users will be able to like hold up their iPad and then kind of walk around and see the people around them being analyzed in real time. And I'm probably going to use a combination of like recognition and probably some other modeling or just like random factors that I build into it. I'm doing all of this with Unity, by the way. So Unity, Amazon, ARKit. And I put this slide up here especially because I need iPads. So if you have an iPad that you are willing to lend me for a small amount of time, I'll take very good care of it. I have an iPad, it's a multiple iPad experience. Yeah, other than that, I have a bunch of questions, and I have I'd like thoughts, I think, on how to be most impactful with this work, because it really, to me, it's very important. It's something that, like, I think has not really been reported on, or is not really in the sort of public conversation in the way that it sort of should be. And I'll talk about these questions a little bit later. I'm almost done, by the way. And so just to give you an indication of sort of the plan for this process, so like the face-to-face one was the first piece, and I'm building 2.0 now, and I've actually been applying for grant funding to do the third iteration of this, which I think will be web-based. Because to me, the goal of the project is, it's sort of like, it's twofold. It's to allow people to experience this in, firsthand, right? Because I think a lot of people have not had the chance to they don't, for instance, don't understand what ARKit's tracking capabilities are for the iPhone 10. They've never had their body or face tracked with an IR camera. They don't necessarily know what can be, or what information can be sort of extracted from their own face in real time. And it's actually really quite astounding. I mean, you can make a match on someone's face with like 10 by 10 pixels, which is a very small amount of data. So just having that information be available to people in a way that empowers them to go and lobby and to have an informed opinion, to me is really, really important. And the best way I think to do that is not with gallery shows, it is to make a web interface that you can kind of link people to with Facebook ads or something like that. So that's sort of in the works. I've been talking to Trevor Owens, who may be here tonight, and I've been thinking of collaborating on that. He's a machine learning, computer vision expert. So if you have funding, please. Okay, and so I do have a number of questions around this, and it's interesting sort of as this project has evolved to have these questions evolved, because initially I had just thought that I would start and do this prototype and then build out some CNN and just get faces from somewhere, and I didn't really understand what that meant. And so I have a lot of questions, and I think a big one is, how do we create a consent culture around biometric data? Because it's really, to me, I don't see an easy solution to that. Either you have people consenting that don't understand what they're consenting to, or you have people not consenting, right? And that seems to be the situation we're currently in, but I don't know if there's an alternative there. How do we make open source training sets that aren't scraping 600,000 people from Flickr without their knowledge? How do we steer policy making around these issues? So those are my questions to you, and then I know that we're sort of running out of time, so if you have thoughts about this, please find me afterwards. And this is, that's a little heavy, so I thought I'd end on this cool.
Thank you, Anastasia. We ended a little over, but come find any of the people that I'm volunteering that show to talk after. They're all up here, especially Anastasia, if you have an iPad or thoughts. She's asked me already. Anyway, so thank you again for coming, and don't forget the showcase is December 5th and 6th, so we hope to see you there. Thanks.
Wait, what was the movie about?
It was called Headless Animals. That was.
Oh, I know Gabe.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Gabe's thing. It was like I think I was like the second. No, I was the first person to be. Yeah, me and my partner were the first to do that one.
She went to the racetrack and slept in the hotel and hitchhiked her.
Yep. For all the actors and everything.
Yeah. I'm actually proposing a course now with this black one.
Cool.
At CCA.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so you're into it. You're like, yeah.
Oh yeah, like I was just like, okay, cool, great. Like this is a really great application.
It's a good point. The guy brought up the food thing, and I think it's like something like this is serious topics, and like there's a lot of destruction, but maybe there is a way to like make it so it's still like you're out in the city.
Somehow, like, yeah. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, like what you're saying, like more enjoyable.
Yeah, well, I feel like